Alternative Reality, Volume 1, Chapter 10. "Can't believe we actually managed to kill off a horde of this size," Bob suddenly said, after the looting process was done and both sides managed to gather a share. To each according to their capabilities and reflexes. "Your skills were damn helpful, glad we brought you along." He paused a bit and glanced at Whale's enlarged money pouch. "Mostly," he then mumbled under his breath. No matter how much intimacy Whale managed to build up with his companions, there were still bandits through and through, greedy, envious of another's success, and downright despicable. Even though it seemed like all these fights and life-threatening situations should have helped form a bond between all of them, something told Whale that if given the correct circumstance, this lot wouldn't hesitate much before stabbing him in the back. A greedy bunch through and through. They'd probably covet the loose change their grandma had, if it was more than they themselves possessed. Knowing that, it was a bit surprising how this bunch was still poor as dirt. You'd think that with such a drive for wealth, they'd manage to accumulate at least some sort of a fortune. Whale scratched the side of his jaw. Suppose that speaks volumes of their capabilities. Whale even decided to adjust the mental note he had on them a bit. In case of emergency, consider them as a liability. "We should continue deeper in. I'm sure this was just the welcoming party," Whale said, lips twisted in a sinister smirk. His colleague's displeasure only served in lifting his mood. And there was quite a bit of lifting remaining, since the enormous loss constantly drilled at his skull. So much potential profit melted into uselessness. Frowning, Bob reluctantly agreed with the idea, but his colleagues required a bit more talking in before they relented. Recent events did shake them up quite a bit, and the idea of something worse did not motivate them much. In the end, the fact that they leveled up and managed to grab a few coins was the thing that reeled them in. They got just enough money to whet their appetites, but not enough to satisfy their greed, and there was little doubt that more experience and riches awaited deeper in. This thought was more enticing than anything Whale could have come up with. Bless their greedy hearts. They were like Whale's spirit animals, sort of. Soon enough, the party was back in the spacious expanse, which they had to so hurriedly abandon not so long ago. This time, however, the only thing greeting them was an eerie silence, and the occasional goblin, crawling about with no obvious purpose. With a mixture of relief and disappointment, Whale figured that what they experienced was a one-time thing, no endless stream of money and experience. Being the opportunistic optimist that Whale no doubt was, however, he decided to milk this fact for all it's worth. Together with his bandit compatriots, the group proceeded to hunt down the goblin stragglers with a dedicated fervor, using it as an opportunity to get more experience, some much desired loot, and most importantly, build up some confidence. Nothing helped build character better than beating down on those smaller and weaker than you, while maintaining numeric superiority, after all. Whale experienced this personally, while being at the receiving end of this ingenious tactic. With a knowing smirk, he watched the bandits go at it with dedication, pleased to see its effectiveness. He could almost physically see that confidence build up as the group dogpiled a single goblin. Now that he was seeing this, Whale had a thought. Maybe those bullies were actually geniuses all along? He felt a new level of appreciation to their approach now that he was on the other side of the fence. Bit by bit, old equipment was replaced by new spoils. Old weapons to new steel swords, old gear to superior onion army attire, even if it was outdated and scavenged. Whale managed to get something as well, though it wasn't exactly very useful. Some old tome, another one that Whale couldn't exactly use, a belt for warriors that he couldn't even equip, and had to give it back to Bob, who was all sour over being too slow to snag it first. What a poor loser. Punk needed to step up his game if he wanted to beat Whale to the punch. Not all was bad though, since the greedy magician did manage to get plenty more coin, at the very least, right from under the noses of the rest to boot. It did, however, result in some consequences. Your intimacy with Bob and his fellows has fallen. They are unhappy over your recent actions. Whale almost coughed. He had no intention to let his fellow outlaws profit while his coffers remained empty. Well, empty-ish. Their priorities clashed. Conflicts were emerging. Whale's leadership was high enough to take the lead in almost everything, but it wasn't high enough to dominate the wills of money-hungry goons. Not enough to suppress his colleagues' interests. But so what? Whale had no intention to let up. He would not sacrifice his own well-being for something as uncertain and unreliable as friendship or companionship, with a group that was just as likely to backstab him as cover his back. And if they proved to be a hindrance sooner than expected, well, Whale had a way to deal with it when the need arose. All in due time. That time did not come anytime soon, however, and the group spent the day hunting and getting ready to delve deeper into the dungeon without any serious hiccups. Well, besides a few scuffles over a coin or two. Morale was at its highest. The expanse fully cleaned out. It was now or never. They dove through a large gaping pathway that led them through a high-ceilinged corridor, dark and oppressive, just like the rest of the dungeon. Eventually, they came out into a large fissure and stopped near a crudely carved bridge of rock that led over it, hanging over a bottomless dark that waited beneath. Was it actually bottomless? Maybe if they shone their lights deeper down, they'd see some sort of a ledge. A bottom to comfortably walk over, who knows? None of the group were too keen on finding out that. Beyond the bridge, a huge broken down gate awaited them, its large doors barely holding on to rusted hinges. Not a single enemy in sight. Exchanging glances, the group didn't hesitate much and proceeded towards it. No movement, no sound, just the ominous echoes of their footsteps, disappearing somewhere in the abyss below. Didn't this situation happen before? Suddenly, an ear-tearing sound of screeching metal echoed loudly, followed by a deafening crash as the rusted-through doors finally gave out. Another victory for the unceasing passage of time. Another mark on its endless board of past victories. Whale's heart shot up to his throat as the very ground underneath seemed to vibrate and the bridge gave way a pained groan. His whole group seemed to freeze in place, as if not moving an inch was what kept them from tumbling down. As a few heartbeats passed, Whale could feel his back go damp with dread. Yet the bridge slowly calmed. It held. A breath of relief slipped out of the magician and the rest of the gang. Luck was on their side, this time. He did not look forward to the descent. After all, Whale was ghastly afraid of heights. Reluctant to start moving, the group stood still for a few more moments, with only the sounds of their heartbeats to keep their company. Yet eventually, the tension eased. Suddenly, as if on cue, a symphony of noise exploded from all around. It was the scrape of angry feet, the screech of cold iron, the guttural growls of hungry throats, and the drum of booming drums. It bounced off the walls, descended from the ceiling, and seemed to even drift at them from the very abyss below. It felt as if the whole dungeon had woken up around them. Where the heck did he even come from all of a sudden? Was it a scripted event? Were there any actual enemies, or was it just noise to scare them? Will did not have enough time to be skeptical of the design. Things were looking quite grim, after all, if it was the former. Knowing from previous experience, the goblins, due to their single-minded nature, would not simply stop and exchange pleasantries once caught up with Whale's group. And the bridge seemed quite narrow, with no protective railing in sight. What mattered now was which way would the goblins come from. "Behind us!" Bob so helpfully shouted all of a sudden, as he pointed into the mulling dark from whence they came. Well then, that conveniently narrowed down their options. Running like mad through the broken down gate seemed like the only feasible option. That, or just plummeting down into the nothingness that waited below. First choice it is then. Well started casting Inferno, and after a few seconds released its fury right in front of the swarm, turning its vanguard into a bundle of bright candles. How his heart ached at the sight. All that precious loot, lost to the fire. Luckily, his sacrifice was not in vain. Seeing their brethren in such a predicament, the rest managed to barely stop their advance, which accomplished Whale's hopes of slowing down the swarm. How convenient that this one wasn't as mindless as the previous one. Maybe the stragglers that survived the previous harvest shared their experience with the rest? Never underestimate the power of gossip. "Let's get the hell out of here. If we stay here, they'll run us over," the greedy magician shouted, and since his colleagues shared his fears, the group ran through the gates into who knows what. They ran like the wind, passing closed doors, collapsed passages and detours, always in a straight line, with the goblins hot on their tail. Desperately, Will kept casting Inferno behind him whenever able, but all it managed to do was slow down their pursuers a bit, just enough to buy them more time. Things didn't look too good, though they were lucky enough to not encounter any other living obstacles. At least not in their direct path. Who knows what might have joined the stampede from any side passages they missed. Eventually, however, they met their first obstruction. Visible at the very end of their flight through the corridor was a large gateway, one side slightly ajar at first glance. Yet before it stood a figure. An apparition of pale skin and worn attire. Covered in rusted-through pieces of metal, with torn leather underneath, the figure stood there almost like a statue. The only indication of life being a slight turn of its helmeted head, as it regarded the swiftly approaching guests, right hand shifting as if to get a firmer grasp on the handle of the brittle-looking broadsword it carried. By the looks of it, days of glory have long passed for this sad excuse for a guard, and Whale didn't feel like slowing down one bit. No disrespect, surely. "None shall pass," the apparition then proclaimed after slowly turning towards his guests. Its voice carrying far in a booming basso, contrary to what one would have expected. Would have been quite the iconic moment, truly. Poor guy must have been practicing to get it just right. Who knew how long he waited to put it in action? Too bad Whale's group weren't exactly in a position to appreciate it. Before the line was even finished, the group was already past and behind, darting through the doorway and barring it shut behind them. Wide-eyed, the Guardian turned to look at the closed doors. Obviously, this has never happened to it before. Before any well-deserved outrage could be expressed, the thundering rumble from behind drew the figure's attention. As the guard turned once again, its eyes went wider still, just as the swarm quickly ran over the wronged sentinel and slammed hard into the doors with all the momentum that was gathered over the long chase. The doors groaned loudly.